Welcome to Notes from the North with Kyle and Sam.
Welcome back to Notes from the North, the official podcast of the Vikings Gazette. We're proud to partner with Vikings Territory and Purple PTSD. And if you're looking for great Vikings content, be sure to stop by those sites. Of course, you're always welcome at vikingsgazette.com. This is episode 23, Kyle. This is we're plugging away. We continue to go, and we're getting ready for the season. But there was a game this past week, and so let's hop into talking about the Colts. You've titled this first down as quarterback concern.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely a hot button topic right now within the Vikings fans.
Yep.
I don't know. I'm not sure about the team, but basically let's recap here. Unless did you have a point there you wanted to make before we jump in?
Well, I will say, maybe I'll hold on to it. You go ahead, ask that first question, and then because I think the team has some concern as well.
Okay, fair. So recapping, Vikings fell to the Colts Saturday night, 12-10, low scoring game. Overall, I think we would agree it's definitely a much better performance for Minnesota, but the offense, there's still some struggles there. So how concerned should we be about the QB situation right now for the Vikings?
So if after the first preseason game, I was looking at the backups and saying to myself, I'm a 3 or 4 to 10 concern, maybe just in that both Browning and Mond really played really poorly. But then you kind of say, okay, well, it's the first preseason game and everything that's gone on. And, it's the 2s and the 3s and, so on and so forth. And then to a certain extent, some of that carries over in that it's still early and, they're playing with guys who, a lot of them probably aren't going to be on the roster at the end. And, Cousins, for instance, he was playing and, Thielen went out after the first series. Thank God it looks like it's just a thigh bruise. So it's not like he pulled a hammy or twisted his ankle. So it looks like Thielen will be fine. But, he went out after a few plays. Jefferson didn't play. Dalvin Cook didn't play. So, your main offensive weapons aren't there, right? So you contextualize all of it and you dress it up a little bit and say, okay, well, maybe it's not as bad as it initially appears, but it was bad, right? And the concern is definitely higher. I know that the team is concerned because Zim was asked about it after the game, and so this is a Chris Thomason tweet, and so this is what Thomason tweeted out. He said, I asked Mike Zimmer if he's considering bringing in a veteran QB to be the backup, and he didn't rule it out. And this is a quote. We'll talk more about it this week. With the monetary situation, we have to be careful. Okay, so at least it's going to be a conversation that things haven't gone as well as they would have hoped. I think the hope would have been that both Browning and Mond would have been further along, especially with what we saw with Browning initially in training camp, where he got this opportunity and really impressed and seemed to step up. And then in 2 games, he's kind of been a deer in the headlights. Like the moment has just seemed too big for him, even though they're 2 meaningless games. And again, I get all the context, and he's working within a very bland offense, not very creative. A lot of the weapons are out. And so I don't exactly expect him to be sensational, but the team is concerned, and I think rightfully so. So it's tough, right? Like Cousins didn't set the world on fire, but there's really no debate. Cousins is QB1 in 2021. He's locked in as the starter, for better or for worse. If he misses time, we're in big trouble. So I'll be curious to see what the Vikings do, if anything at all. I know Dustin over at Vikings Territory, he kind of took a few minutes yesterday to talk about the QB2 situation and who was available. And, it's not great. When I look at his list, maybe the most intriguing one is Josh Rosen. But then again, Rosen hasn't done anything in the NFL, right? Like he's been a bust. Maybe he could develop into a solid backup quarterback. I don't know. And maybe Kellen Mond will in time. It's not, this isn't necessarily an indictment on Kellen Mond's career. It's just, I don't think anyone can look at his 2 preseason games and say, yeah, this kid is ready to play now. Right?
Yeah. Josh Rosen's an interesting name because it feels like this would be what, team 5 team 6 early
Yeah,
on.
he's been all over.
Like a 10th overall pick in 2018, and like it's like sure there's some upside, but there's no more certainty. And I think you're kind of looking for something that's isn't gonna, like, I don't think you're with a backup quarterback, you want something that's steady, because that's what seems to be really lacking there. And he could very well do that, but yeah, there's not a whole lot there. So
Yeah,
who would you say then right now is the backup QB?
but that's the tough part, right? So like going into the first preseason game, it was very clearly Jake Browning. Okay. And then after the preseason game, he was still getting all the QB2 reps. He was still the next man up in practice. You're saying, okay, he underwhelmed, but again, all that context, he's still QB2. Kellen Mond's still number 3. Let's see what happens in the next preseason game. But then they both go out and they both just play just very, very poorly, right? Like Jake Browning, so he finished 6 for 15 for 82 yards. And it's not just, I mean, the basic stats are ugly, obviously, but it's not just that. Is, you watch him, he was seeing ghosts, right? Like when pressure wasn't there, he was skittish, right? And then Kellen Mond was 6 for 12 for 61 yards, which I don't know if you want to say that's better or worse. It's still pretty bad. 50% passing. The average isn't great. I know he had the one decent pass called back because of a holding penalty, but who knows? Maybe he would have been sacked on that play if there wasn't a holding penalty. And then Mond is just, both have been very inaccurate, not great pocket presence. It's been disappointing. Now, again, Kellen Mond might go on. I was just reading an old Bob McGinn piece. He was like a Packers writer for like 4 decades, right? And I think he's still around. I'm not sure where he is now. He was with the Athletic for a while, but he, I was just reading this piece that he wrote a couple years ago, and he was talking about how Aaron Rodgers really didn't play well, like in the first couple years with the Packers, right? In practice, he didn't look like he was ready. And then, of course, he went on to be a sensational quarterback. And I'm not saying that Kellen Mond's going to necessarily do that, where you have, a year or two where he's awful in preseason and practice and then goes on to be great. But I just think that quite often quarterbacks struggle when they make the leap, and quite often they can go on and still have great careers. So Kellen Mond might still end up being a great quarterback, and I'm not, in no way am I throwing in the towel on Kellen Mond. I just, boys, it'd be concerning if he had to start games. Now, mind you, Clint Kubiak could do more, and I suspect that once this regular season gets here, the preseason's done, this offense should look considerably different, I suspect.
Right.
Because right now it's bland, it's boring. You're not trying to show your hands. And so I expect them to have a lot more bootlegs, a lot more rollouts, a lot more screen passes, a lot more rhythm and consistency, right? But then also, some of those bootlegs and the play action, that kind of thing, you can get explosive plays off that as well. And so I expect that week 1 in Cincinnati, you're going to see more of that. I would just personally feel a little more confident in the sense that this is the first time Clint Kubiak has ever done this, right? The dude's like in his 30s. He's just a few years older than Sam and I, right? And he's never been an offensive coordinator in the NFL. He's never called plays beyond what he's been doing. And, it hasn't looked good, right? So, the offense is going to take a step forward. Just the basic fact that the talent's going to be there. Cousins will be under center. Kubiak's going to be able to kind of fully unleash his system and get creative and do his stuff. And that's great. But there's a lot of question marks right now. And so it's going to be very, very, very interesting.
For sure. And like the backup quarterback position doesn't matter until it does. Like it's like there could be very well no need for it and they're all good, but it's this weird position where it actually matters a ton because of that injury concern, and especially with kind of this year and who knows what will happen, and missed games and COVID is still a possibility.
Exactly.
And like it is a real like I do feel like Mond at least looks comfortable back there, and like with Browning, it feels like it's going to be hard for him to overcome. Like he needs something to gain some confidence, and he did have a couple drives where he actually 82 of his passing yards were after like kind of that 2-minute drill. Like he had those two drives. So there was a little bit there, although the defense is in a prevent position there, and so it's a little bit easier. But it is, I think it's fair for people to be concerned. I think often people get overly concerned with where things are at and can dissect issues, but I don't think you're feeling comfortable with either of those guys jumping in with what they've shown so far.
No, but in fairness too, like I was looking at PFF and some of the rosters on there. If Tom Brady goes down, it's going to be Blaine Gabbert or Kyle Trask. Should Tampa fans be confident in that, right? Or there's a lot of teams where you say, okay, if Matthew Stafford goes down for the Rams, should the team be confident in their backup? So there's a lot of teams where you say, okay, if the number one guy goes down, they're in trouble, right? So I want to balance that a little bit in the sense that, like, goodness, it's hard enough getting one good quarterback, let alone two, right? But with what Sam was saying with the COVID situation, you could easily lose a game, not because you sprain your ankle or not because you blow out your knee or get a concussion, but because you're a close contact, right? And so in that situation, we're really hoping that the defense and the special teams can bail us out. And we'll see. But obviously the hope is that Cousins will be available for the full season. We're living in a strange world. And so we'll see. It's definitely concerning, and I'm definitely curious to see what the Vikings will do at backup quarterback, because it's definitely on the radar.
Yeah. So, like you mentioned, Kubiak and just this position being new to him. Like, are you or should people be concerned about what you've seen from him thus far?
I would be less concerned if this was Gary Kubiak. I'd be less concerned because he's done it before. He's done it a lot, right? And he's not like Gary Kubiak is the perfect coach, but he is a good coach, right? And he's just got so much wisdom and experience to draw on. And Clint Kubiak, like there are good coaches on that side of the ball for the Vikings, and I'm sure he'll lean on his dad too. He'll lean on Zim, who's been around. But gosh, no one will believe you can do it until you do it, right? Yeah. Like how confident can we be in Clint Kubiak until we actually see him do it? Until we actually see him and say, "Hey, that was a great game plan. He kept the opposition off balance the whole game." We'll see. I mean, it just feels like with him, it's a low floor, high ceiling kind of situation. And so we could bottom out. We get a really low floor. It could go really poorly, or things could go really excellent. Maybe he's like a Kyle Shanahan type who just takes over for his dad kind of thing and just follows in his footsteps, but then puts this modern twist on it and ends up being this kind of like boy wonder. Sean McVay's of the world's, Kyle Shanahan, maybe Clint Kubiak is that next one. So we'll see, but it's risky.
For sure. It's risky. You made a point last week where, like, obviously you're not throwing out all your premier packages right now. Your premier plays, like this is preseason. But I don't know about you, but like the second half of these games, these past 2 weeks have been like almost like borderline unwatchable.
Yes.
Is how like bad they are.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, I'm curious what they're looking for at that point, because I know as a fan, the entertainment value, when normally the third and fourth quarters have been, those are when things happen. Obviously it's different right now because they're putting in the backup players fighting positions. But it's been painful to watch.
It has been, and I mean, they said it on the game broadcast. Here we got 2 full preseason games, and the offense still hasn't scored a touchdown.
Yeah,
right. We had the pick 6 from Troy Dye, and then we've had some field goals, and we haven't had anything else, and that's concerning, right? Yeah. Like that is level. That's reason for concern. The level of concern shouldn't necessarily be outright panic. I'm not willing to, mortgage the future to trade for someone to bring someone in just in case, but it's not good. It's not good. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens in the third preseason game. But so far, it's been a little bit lackluster for sure.
And like none of this matters until it does matter. And Exactly. It's like hard. Like it's like as game one, if they come out firing, it's like it doesn't matter. But
who cares?
If this is a foreshadowing of what's to come, then that's when I think that's why people can be concerned. Transitioning here, did want to talk a little bit about players that are trending up and trending down. And so I know you've prepared 3 players that are trending up, or who you think are trending up, and then 3 players who are trending down. So let's start with the positives. Who would you say are three players that are trending upwards right now with the Minnesota Vikings roster?
Yeah, so the focus, so 3 up, 3 down. Probably going to write about this at some point today or tomorrow. But I thought it was kind of an interesting topic. 3 up, 3 down is a baseball term. But in any case, it illustrates the idea here for the segment. So unsurprisingly, the 3 up are going to all come from special teams or defense. And that's Britton Colquitt, Troy Dye, Josh Metellus. So Colquitt had a much better game, a veteran punter. And after the first preseason game, Zim said, there is reason for concern because Colquitt just did so poorly with his punts. But he punted a lot this game, and he averaged 46.1 yards overall. So really, it's a pretty healthy, robust number. And the coverage was a lot better. And some of that was Josh Metellus. That's the reason why I have him on there. I would be surprised at this point if he doesn't make the team, almost exclusively because of his ability on special teams. I think on defense, he's a good tackler, but I think he can get lost in coverage. And so again, if he's out there, I think you're concerned. But if he's on your punt coverage or your kickoff team, you're feeling really good because the dude can hustle and the dude can tackle. And so we all know how poorly special teams played last year. And so to have these guys who can cover really well, I thought Josh Metellus has played really well in special teams. And then Troy Dye, obviously he had the pick 6. He should have had a second interception as well. He was sent on a blitz, didn't quite get there fast enough, but he did hit the QB really hard and clean. Like it was a clean, hard hit. Again, this is one of those ones where, I would show it to my boys that I coached in high school. Like, this is how you do it. You're hitting with your shoulder. It's in his midsection. We're not hitting his head. We're not hitting his knees. It was a clean, hard, physical football play, textbook, right? It was just like, it was a perfect. And then he was good in run defense as well. So he had a rough rookie year, but he has looked nice so far. And so much of what I think he struggled with in his rookie year was that he was just in this, like, if anything, he's not a bad player, but he was put in a bad role, right? He was just put in a role that he wasn't ready for. But if he's the LB4, if he's our 4th linebacker, or maybe even our 5th, because Blake Lynch might end up being the 4th, then I think he can be nice, man. He can come in and contribute here and there and then be good on special teams. Troy Dye had a nice game. Was there any, those 3 from your perspective, or then other players you thought kind of stood out?
Yeah, no, for sure. Troy Dye, it was amazing to see. Like the thing that I noticed the most about this game, personally, was just the way that the linebackers were able to get upfield,
much better.
And he was definitely one of those. And I was thinking, I don't think that Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater would have had to wash their jerseys after last week. Like, they did not.
Yeah, probably not.
I don't know if they actually hit the ground at any point. But even from the first play, it was they brought that blitz, and I was like, oh, okay, they can do this. So I just noticed the linebackers as a whole. I am curious what you think about the running back position, and I felt I feel like the running backs, it feels like there's 4 good ones there. Obviously we haven't seen Cook yet, but I know Matheson was involved early in the pass game. But I felt for as much as the passing game has struggled, it feels like, hey, you got 4 legitimate backs here, and I guess that's not even including Ham. And so
that's the thing. So I think CJ Ham's probably a lock, right? Because he's, as far as fullbacks go, he's pretty well compensated, right? He's on a decent contract, and I know the coaches love him because he's a special teams guy, and he took a carry for 9 yards, I think, in this past game. And I know Zim has spoken different times that he can do that, and he can catch the ball a little bit. CJ Ham will almost certainly be on the team. And then from there, Dalvin Cook and Madison are both lock. And so those are 3 in the running back room. And then I think Amir Abdullah is going to be your 3rd tailback, because he contributes on special teams. He can be really good on passing downs. You can line him up out wide, which they've done a little bit in the preseason already. And then AJ Rose, really strong first preseason game, struggled in the second one. I can't imagine he makes the team. I just can't imagine when you have Cook, Madison, Abdullah, there's already not enough ball to have all the 3 of these guys involved. Cook is going to have the vast majority, and rightfully so, but you can make a case that Madison and Abdullah should be more involved. And then Ham is going to get a few touches here and there, and then obviously be in a blocking role. Jake Vargas is their other fullback, and he's been pretty nice. He's been a bit of a check down guy for Browning and Mond, so he's a bit of a security blanket, which is nice. But unless he really, really pops on special teams, I can't imagine he gets beyond the practice squad. But I would imagine he does make the practice squad because he's got pretty good hands. And
sure.
And if Ham were to go down, a fullback is a big part of this offense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that Jake Vargas will be on the practice squad. It's going to be interesting what they do with AJ Rose. I don't know how they'll handle that.
For sure. Well, Abdullah looked good. Rose, you said, we didn't mention him last week. I felt like he looked good.
Very good.
Week. He did have that 14-yard run. But other than that, he was pretty stifled this game. But it's obviously, it feels like, and maybe you might disagree, but it feels like either it seems like the Vikings have incredible depth at positions, or they have a lot of like concern. Like there's a few positions where like you're like, oh, okay, like they've got a lot of options here. And obviously the run game is important to the offense. AJ Rose obviously has to do something remarkable to make this team because of what's ahead of him, and there's not enough ball for him to do stuff. But anyways, I did want to mention that. Going towards the negative, who would you say are three players that are trending downward at this point?
Yeah, I think this is kind of, I got three names down here, but maybe I'll leave it in a sense because I want to put Browning and Mond, but we just talked about them. I'm going to kind of collapse them into one. Just the QB2 and QB3. It's not really fair for them to take up two slots, I don't think. But they're definitely trending down. So much so that the team might bring in outside help, right? They're gonna look at veterans and see. Mond is going to make this team no matter what, because he's a third round pick, right? Browning might very well get cut, and maybe he's kept on the practice squad. But it's going to be interesting. From there, Cameron Dantzler's definitely gone down. I mean, Chris Boyd was getting snaps ahead of him, and don't get me wrong, Boyd's played well. I like Chris Boyd, but with what we saw from Dantzler last year, I think most people were planning and hoping for him being a starting caliber. Maybe he doesn't start because Breeland is so good and Peterson's so good. Maybe you just have this, I don't want to say embarrassment of riches, but you just have a lot of strong options. And so maybe he gets forced out as a result, but he still is a starting caliber guy who gets a lot of snaps. Through the preseason so far, he's really been up and down, and he's gotten scorched deep a couple times. And it's worth noting, I guess, that coming into the draft, the issue for him wasn't his tape. The issue wasn't the product in the field, but it was his 40 time. And there were concerns about his speed or lack thereof, and whether he'd be able to keep up with the speedy guys, the Tyreek Hills of the world. I mean, not many can, obviously, but that breed of receiver where they're just very, very fast, very, very explosive, that kind of type of receiver. And so far he's struggled with that. And so Cameron Dantzler has definitely trended downward. From there, I don't actually know who to put third. I've got a little bit of concern about Rashad Hill. He allowed a pretty quick sack to on Cousins there, which put them in like a 3rd and 20 situation or something like that. Because I think it was 2nd and 18, and then I think they lost a couple yards in the next play. But the Vikings offense is just not built for 2nd and 18, nor are they built for 3rd and 20. So the Rashad Hill stuff to me was a little bit concerning. And then from there, I wonder about some of the depth defensive ends. There's a real logjam there. I wonder about if Jalen Holmes is able to snag a spot. I like him. And then I wonder about safety. Some of the backup safeties, Miles Dorn. I'm not sure. Cameron Bynum, he's probably going to be on the team because he's a draft pick, but he struggled. So I don't know. There's a few contenders for that 3rd spot. Is there anyone that you thought that I didn't mention who's kind of giving you some reason for concern?
No, I was going to mention Dantzler a little bit. I do kind of wonder. I know I was trying to find if anyone was talking about it, but it does. I know he's had an injury history.
Yeah, that's right.
And there is something where it just doesn't look right. Especially in that play in week 1, where he got burned for the touchdown.
Yeah.
Like I kind of wonder if there's something going on there. But you obviously would hope, especially with the way that Peterson and Breland have come in, that would motivate him to really compete for that position. And like you said, it definitely does not seem like he's, from what I can remember from last year, that he's taken that kind of that next step, that because we were kind of talking about he's in that competition for that cornerback 2 spot, and he certainly has got burned on a few plays. And so
in contrast, Breland looked great.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Breland's going to be the second cornerback.
Yeah.
It's almost 100% at this stage. It's Peterson and Breland on the outside, and it's Mackenzie Alexander in the slot. Right. And then really it's can Dantzler hold off Chris Boyd for the fourth quarterback or cornerback spot. Right. That's kind of where we're at this stage.
Yeah. And Boyd looked like he had a couple of plays where he got burned, but there was also some plays where he stepped up again. And I don't know, like just even you can just see with some players the energy they bring, and like just watching him after he makes a play and how he responds. It just feels like that's something that obviously it's you want players that are going to make plays, but I am looking for, like you talked about last week, a little bit of swagger from this defense, and he seems to be a guy that's bringing that a little bit.
I don't know if you've heard one of Zim's sayings is, "I'd rather have to say whoa than go," which is to say, I'd rather have to say to a player, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, settle down. You're being too aggressive," as opposed to "Get going, play faster, be more physical." I'd rather I say whoa than go. And with Chris Boyd, the issue is saying whoa as opposed to go. I mean, his issue is playing a touch too fast, taking bad angles, maybe being too physical. Like his strengths can be his weaknesses, right? But he's a guy who I think Zim probably likes because he plays with that swagger, plays that confidence, plays with the physicality. If he's my fourth corner, my fifth corner, I love that because he's a strong special teamer, and when you put him in, you know that he's going to compete like heck, right? Like he's going to make mistakes, yes. But which team's fifth corner win it or fourth quarter win it, right? So you know that at the very least, dude's not going to back down. He's going to be physical in the run game. And he is like, if he gets burned, he's going to be coming back the next play and playing strong. So I like Chris Boyd a lot. It's just disappointing with Dantzler.
Yeah, for sure. And at least in an encouraging sense, it's not like there's no one that's coming up. It's like the fact that Boyd is there and challenging Dantzler from kind of behind, I guess, in what we would have early predicted in terms of the depth chart. So anyways, there's still there. And I do wonder about the injury history, and you kind of always wonder what players are battling through. But that was the name that I was thinking. We can transition here to the third down here and looking ahead. The Vikings need to get to 80 guys tomorrow. They've already made a couple moves. What would you say they do from here, or how do they proceed?
So they got to get from 85 to 80, right? And then in a week's time, a weekish, I think it's the 31st of August, they have to get to 53, right? So, things are going to be moving pretty fast and furious following that Kansas City game. But in the meantime, they've already cut Warren Jackson and Dylan Maven, which, I mean, I don't imagine anybody had them on the Vikings final roster. From there, I think they're actually down to 82 because Cameron Smith retired. I don't believe they brought somebody in to replace his spot. And so in that sense, that kind of saves you from making a decision because the decision's been made. He got the concussion. He had open heart surgery last year, all these health, and he just sounds like he made the right decision for him and his personal health. Got to respect it. Fair enough. And so to me, what's going to be fascinating, I don't know who these two players will be. I'm sure the Vikings do, and I'm sure they'll make their decisions here soon enough because it has to happen by tomorrow. I'm going to be curious to see what they do at quarterback because they still currently have 5 on the roster, right? And so you've got obviously Cousins, Mond, and Browning, who we've been talking about a lot today. But then you also have Nate Stanley, who was chosen late last draft, and he hasn't dressed for either of these games. And then you have Etling, this fifth quarterback, who they brought in just basically as a camp arm after the whole COVID situation, and Mond and Stanley and Cousins were out, and all you had was Jake Browning. Well, you can't run training camp practices, 90 men, with one quarterback. You need camp, and so they brought in these two camp arms, and one of them has stuck around. I don't. There's no way that he should really be on the roster. How is he going to leapfrog three quarterbacks? But it's interesting that he's still there, right? Like he's not getting any opportunity in the preseason games, but he's still there. And so I wonder, what does that mean in terms of will the Vikings try and keep maybe two quarterbacks on the practice squad? So maybe you go into the season with Cousins and Browning, or rather Cousins and Mond, and then maybe Browning and this other guy is on the practice squad. I don't know, but it's very curious to me that that fifth quarterback wasn't the first one to be cut, because he's getting zero opportunity and seemingly has no path forward with the Vikings to any meaningful role, even QB3 being a meaningful role in this sense. So it's going to be very interesting. And then from there, I was just seeing on Twitter, someone was mentioning, he tagged the Vikings Gazette on Twitter and was mentioning that he was wondering if the Vikings would move or cut one of their veterans at this stage. Of course, everyone's thinking of Dakota Dozier, but you kind of like doing right by a vet to say, you're not going to be on our 53. We'll cut you now to give you more time to get on somewhere else, right? And try and so maybe look out for that as well. Someone had mentioned that just a few minutes ago, and it's a point worth considering. So those are the kind of the two things I'm watching: what they'll do with their five quarterbacks, right? And then what they'll do if they'll move a vet as kind of like a good gesture to say, we don't have a spot for you, unfortunately, but have a go of it a little bit earlier and see if you can latch on somewhere else.
Yeah, well, I like Dakota Dozier. I don't know if you see in the Minnesota Vikings, like every single announcement that they make right now is just littered with these, like, you want to drop Dakota Dozier posts, and just from that standpoint, I'm almost like cheering for him. I almost want him to stay, because it just feels it feels like bullying.
I feel bad for the guy. It's gone too far.
It's like at some point it's like, okay, like there was a joke there, but now it's just like anyways, it just doesn't feel helpful for anyone involved. So in some ways you feel like it would be more respectful to drop him, if you're going to drop him now, versus when the mass cut happens to get to 53.
If you're 99.9% certain that Dakota Dozier is not on our final roster, and nor do we want him for our practice squad, right? Like if there's just like no future for him in Minnesota, then cut him now, right? Because there are teams that would want a veteran, versatile lineman, right? And in a sense, you do right by a guy, and you give him a chance to continue his career, right? And have a role. That's important, I think, for a lot of journeyman guys. And then I wonder too what that means for the NFL. Is not that big of a community, and I wonder what that means for other veteran guys, journeyman guys, to want to work with the Vikings in the future. Like, hey, they do right by us. They treat us well. They respect us. We talked about AJ Rose. One of that you say, well, he put some stuff on tape in the first preseason game. There's no path forward probably with the Vikings, but there might be a path forward somewhere else, right? If it's not the practice squad with the Vikings. And so, some of these guys, that's their resume, right? For someone like AJ Rose, and then for Dakota, he's obviously a vet. He's got a lot more tape. And so the league knows who he is. But yeah, I think it's a certain amount of respect, right? And just the organization handling itself with integrity. But mind you, this, I'm just speculating. And Dozier, at the end of the day, if I was guessing right now, I still think he makes the roster, because I still think they value his veteran, savvy and leadership and the versatility. But I just don't be shocked if there's a veteran guy who they do cut, and that being the rationale.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. It feels like such a drastic thing. Like you're cutting a few players here, and then all of a sudden, like, it's just like,
exactly,
bam, like 27 guys.
Calm before the storm.
Like you've got an entire lineup plus some that's just getting dropped.
Now, mind you, a lot of those guys, not all, because you're going to try, and the Vikings will be looking at other teams. They'll leave a couple spots in their practice squad open and try and steal a couple guys. But so you cut 27. I think the practice squads are set at 16 again because of COVID. So a lot of those dudes you're trying to bring back. Mm-hmm. Maybe 13 or 14 you're going to prioritize, and then see if there's other guys. Because the Viking scouts are working overtime right now, and so they're seeing because again, whatever you put on tape, that's your resume, right?
Yeah.
And so, yes, 27 get cut. A lot of them hopefully will come back.
Right.
Half, let's say, around half for the practice squad, and then go from there, right?
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting.
For sure. So like knowing that these cuts are happening, which Vikings would you say are like, there's a lot of them obviously, but which Vikings in particular that you have an eye on are fighting for that roster spot on Friday night?
You know, it's so much of it is going to come down to special teams, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, a tight end, is it going to be Davidson or Dillon? They probably want to keep 3 tight ends. Who's it going to be, right? Like when I think of the depth receivers, you know, is Dan Kisna, is he going to have enough of an impact on special teams? Like he is lightning fast. And they were saying on the game broadcast that they asked Dalvin Cook, if you did a 100-yard sprint with Dan Kisna, who would win? And Cook was like, him, easily. Like he is so fast, and that makes him really intriguing as a gunner because he's really long, like he's got a pretty big frame, and he's so fast. He gets down the field in a hurry, and it's hard to block him, but the man can't tackle. Right? So it's, you know, it's like having and I know he is a receiver, but it's like having a receiver who's blazing fast, but he has no hands. It's like, well, it's nice that you can get deep and get open, but if you can't actually catch the ball, it's the same thing with the gunner on punt return or punt coverage, where you say, well, it's amazing that you get down the field in a hurry, but if you can't tackle the man when you're there, it's not much good. So I wonder about some of these guys who, you know, Kisna was with us last year, always was intriguing, but kind of struggled. The tight end 3 position, you know, the Vikings are in 13 personnel, not a lot, but they do it, right? And that third tight end is going to have to be able to come in and run block. You know, Zach Davidson is the draft pick. Dillon probably, I don't know, he's had some opportunities, but it's just going to be interesting to see who really pops. And then from there, I'm really hoping to see a little more maybe from Cameron Bynum, Josh Metellus, you know, the backup safety spot. I mean, these guys are fighting for their spots, right? And I have my favorites at this point. Like Josh Metellus is like my new favorite Viking because he's such a great tackler on special teams. But again, we'll see what the Vikings decide. I imagine he'll be there, but you know, that Kansas City game on Friday is going to be very, very interesting. And then like Sam was saying, it kind of feels like it goes slow. And then you need to cut, you know, dozens of players. Right. And so this is the final shot Friday night.
Yeah. Regarding the tight end position, I don't feel like either of those guys, Dillon or Davidson, have really done a whole lot to improve their stock. Like I feel like they've both had some drops.
That's right.
I know Davidson's the rookie. Question, do you think that there's any reason that Davidson would get a spot over Dillon, excluding the fact that he's the new shiny toy, the new draft pick, based on his history as a punter, or is that like not even matter for the team?
I think it does matter to at least a little bit, in the sense that like the more you can do. Mm-hmm. If you're a depth guy and all you can do is be a lousy tight end, well, forget that. But if you're a depth guy who can be a lousy tight end who is improving and who in a pinch can be your punter, right? Like if you know, God forbid, Colquitt strains his hammy on Friday, you know that you can dress Davidson and at least have some semblance of a normal punt team. Okay, that's huge, right? Like because typically, you know, you're up Poop Creek. If your punter goes down, you don't have a backup punter, so it's your kicker or you're going for it on 4th down or whatever it is you're doing. And so I think if you evaluate Dillon and Davidson and you say they basically offer us, in essence, the exact same thing on the field, both in terms of maybe they're blocking and tackling on special teams and then in the passing game and run blocking, all that. But Davidson in a pinch could be our punter. Well, then I think that has to elevate Davidson. It has to.
Yeah.
The more you can do, right? The more you can do.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. Good. Anything else before we transition here to wrapping up with the odds and ends?
No, let's do odds and ends.
Cool. Well, we'll have a very short wild update, but before we get there was some big news this week that was not Vikings related in the NFL. Right. Tim Tebow has been cut. Kyle and I had a discussion about this months ago. If people forget or weren't listening at that point, Kyle thought he was going to be the number 1 tight end in the league. No, Kyle said, I think he said something like 10 to 12 catches a week, regular part of
Yikes.
Or no, sorry, not 10 to 12. It was something about, I don't know, maybe you remember what you said. It was something like you thought he was going to be 10 to 15 plays a game.
Right. Yeah, I thought he would be a somewhat consistent contributor. And then they're like as the kind of like the tight end 2 or 3, and then special teams. Right.
Right.
And here's my rationale. So that ended up being spectacularly wrong. But in my defense, so my rationale was, so Tebow is like wildly famous and wildly popular in Jacksonville, right? Because he played college in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And so my rationale is, why do you bring this guy in and create this media frenzy and everything that goes with it, unless you're actually serious about him making the team, unless you actually think he can be maybe my tight end 3 who can be a lead blocker in some runs because he's really strong and rugged, and then maybe contribute in special teams. So that's I look at it and say to myself, if he really is as much of a long shot as we all, or as the kind of the consensus, the general wisdom was, then why even do it? It doesn't make any sense. Like, you're a first-time head coach, you got Trevor Lawrence there, the number 1 overall pick. You're just trying to keep your head down, do your work, and basically resurrect this franchise. Jacksonville is not a good franchise. You're trying to build it up and build something. Why create this headache? That was my rationale. And so I was looking at it and saying to myself, okay, well, maybe Urban Meyer, because of their history, maybe he's actually going to give him a role here. And so that was my guess. And that ended up being very, very wrong.
Mm-hmm. I think I had said, like,
do with that what you will.
Yeah. I think I was like, I'd be shocked if he gets into more than 3 plays in the season.
Yeah, that's right. Sam was definitely more skeptical.
And like, I think that it's interesting you say that, because part of me feels like him being around for the whole season might have been more of a headache than cutting him now. Like, there's always this buzz of like, oh, if he's not doing enough, like if he's not getting enough, it's like, oh, like, let's see Tim, Tebow time, let's go.
That's right.
Which like is a little different. Like a tight end is obviously an important position, but it's not really the game breaking. I think that obviously I would have loved to see him play. I love Tim Tebow. I was earnestly cheering for him, but it feels a little bit like, even just seeing how much media coverage and watching the Skip Baylesses of the world just love to talk about him being cut this early on. It's like they're grasping for whatever they can at this point. But I do feel a little bit like it was, and similar what you're talking about with Dakota Dozier, in some ways a respect move to let him go at this point, because I do wonder how much of a distraction it would have been for the team. Obviously they're not competing, they're not going for a playoff position, and so in some ways it'd be nice to have that media buzz, but I don't know, I think this is the last that we've seen from Tim in terms of trying to make this NFL comeback, and it pains me to say it. I wish he was still around. Maybe some team tries to do something at some point to create that media buzz, but
Vikings do need a backup quarterback. The Vikings do too, so we'll see. We'll see.
That would be interesting. I don't think we've gotten there yet.
Can you imagine Tebow and Zim? How that would go?
That would be interesting. I like, honestly, it would be a lot of fun. But I don't think they need the distraction for what they're hoping with the season. I don't think that, especially with kind of the feeling of where the team is going and what they're trying to do at this point, and the aspirations they have for the season, I don't think it's worth the distraction, but it would be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Hard pass.
Yeah. Transitioning a little bit to the Wild. I know we've been talking a little about these contracts with Fiala and Kaprizov, and Fiala did sign this past week to a 1-year deal, $5.1 million. A lot of money. 1 year. I think there was probably some hope that he would be signed beyond this and have a longer term deal, but they end up coming down to the 1-year deal. And the one positive is that he stays as an RFA, and they still have those rights when they negotiate a new deal next year. And like we talked about, 2022, 2023 is really when those buyouts really hit this team. They do have some money that will be coming off the books with Rask and Goligoski and a couple other smaller UFAs this year. I don't know. I think it's always a good idea to lock up players that are important to the team for long term. And I feel like Fiala is the kind of guy that you want to do that. And if he breaks out this year, then you're stuck paying him a little bit more than maybe he would have commanded this year. But I also do think that teams get burned on long-term deals a lot of the time. Not saying that I don't think that he would be a guy that would do that. But obviously, this is what they're able to come to, and that's where they're at. So now they've got 13 million left in cap space, and they've got Kaprizov. Right now, they're sitting at 12 forwards and 60, and 2 goalies on their roster with that cap hit. And so it's going to be a really fascinating next week and a half with the kind of self-imposed. I guess it's even less. It's week and a day. Self-imposed deadline that Kaprizov and his camp have put in with this threat of the KHL offer. So it's going to be an interesting week to watch and see what they do.
Yep. The Fiala deal kind of, maybe you disagree. It kind of feels like settling for a field goal.
Yeah.
In that, it's not bad getting 3 points, but we had put together a pretty nice drive. We were hoping for a touchdown, but then we kind of stalled and kicked a field goal. It was it's great. It's just, it's tough to really, really get ahead doing that. But I mean, as Sam was saying, he's still an RFA afterwards, but I guess the risk is that, in a sense, that he comes back and does really, really well. And then now he's demanding far more than 5.1 million a year or whatever it would have been if he had signed a multi-year extension. So to me, it's not, Minnesota has to keep him, obviously. And it's good that the team still has some control next year, but it does feel like settling for a field goal.
Yeah. He's a good player. I know Dom in with the Athletic has this as a good contract. He's got a whole chart that projects like a player's yearly market value, and this is based on years of historical data and such. And so he projected that his market value this year would be 7.3 million. And so he's got a positive value, a good probability that he'll outperform the contract. Looking forward though, by the time he gets to 2025, 2026, that's when it starts to move a little bit in the downtrend, 28, 29 age when players there. And so it will be interesting to see it. In some ways, I think as fans, you get disappointed when you want a player locked in because you hate the negotiation process is just painful sometimes.
Yeah,
to listen to and be part of. But anyways, it's done. They've got it. They're there, and so now we'll kind of wait to see what happens next year, and maybe they come to an extension mid-season and don't have to go through this process again.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I guess time will tell.
Yeah. Good. Well, we'll wrap up there. Looking forward to Friday, watching Kansas City. Be interesting to see how the Vikings defense does. I'm sure Mahomes. I'm assuming Mahomes will play a drive, but I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised with anything. I mean, I'd be surprised if he play a lot, but no, I don't imagine he'll play. If he does play, it'll be very sparingly and pretty conservative. And then I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't play at all. No, exactly. It would be fun to see what happens if he is in and see how he matches up. But regardless, we got one preseason game left. Anyways, we want to thank people for listening. Be sure to stop by VikingsGazette.com for great Minnesota Vikings news, commentary, and analysis. TVG can be found on Twitter and Facebook at Vikings Gazette. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.